Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to the first Women Plus Water conversation for 2025. I can't believe I'm saying 2025. I want to begin by acknowledging that all of us participate today from traditional territories of First Peoples across the country here in Canada and around the world. Those of us in Saskatoon are gathered on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. The University of Saskatchewan is committed to honoring and supporting Indigenous peoples, cultures, values, and languages that belong to the land. From my perspective, water is the lifeblood of people and societies and connecting us and intimately connected to the lands that we speak about in our land acknowledgements. We pay our respect to First Nations and Métis ancestors of the Saskatoon region and reaffirm our relationships both with one another and with the land and waters that are so essential to our health and our well-being. I invite those of you joining from other territories today to reflect on and recognize the lands and waters that you call home and to set an intention to have a productive and positive discussion today. I'm Corinne Schuster-Wallace. I'm a water health and local water security researcher here at the University of Saskatchewan. I'm the executive director of the Global Institute for Water Security, and I'm also the founder of Women Plus Water. For those of you joining for the first time, Women Plus Water is designed to increase the visibility of women and other equity-deserving groups in water, and also engage people to learn about the gendered impacts of water research, water management, and water decision-making. It's a thriving international community. Relationships connect people across borders. We elevate women and gender diverse voices and create space for innovative conversations that really do redefine inclusive excellence in water. And over the last 7 years, 3,000 people from more than 60 nation states have engaged with the series. And we're so delighted to be growing this inclusive community together, most importantly with your support, because we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you. And our community is growing. I'm excited to share that Women Plus Water is now on LinkedIn and on Blue Sky. So give us a follow. I think the links just went up in the chat. So feel free to follow us there to stay up to date with our initiatives. And we'd love to see you there. We have our Women Plus Water expert list. It opened for registration 2 years ago. We have over 200 experts on this public-facing list, and it's really designed to connect you with people and opportunities to share your research, to share your expertise, to share your knowledge on gender and all areas of water on your terms in spaces that are meaningful to you. And so if you haven't already registered, feel free, go on our website. Again, that'll be in the chat for you. And we're excited to do a bit of a pre-announcement because next month we're going to be launching the Women Plus Water Mentorship Circles. And that'll be during our conversation on inclusive fieldwork on February 11th, which is also the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. So hopefully you're registered and will be joining us for that conversation. But our mentorship circles will allow members of the expert list to host and participate in informal online opportunities to share experiences and offer support within small group settings. And the entire Women Plus Water community will be welcome to join these events. So make sure to join our next conversation. Keep your eyes on the website, and we'll also send an announcement up through the mailing list. We hold this Women Plus Water monthly conversation series between January and April each year, and we focus on specific water-related themes on each conversation. And today's conversation focuses on the water climate crisis in small island states. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined today by Hayden, Ashley, and Jerry, who are going to provide their unique and expert knowledge on the water and climate crisis that small island states are facing. So thank you to the three of you for joining us today and sharing your time with us. Before I pass the floor over, I really want to thank the Women Plus Water team who work tirelessly behind the scenes. Viviana Barrerio Nina, Tara Hackle, Chandra Rajulapati, Stacey Domansky, Jessie Witto, but also Valen Louis are our interpreters, and we have live English captioners as well, again, in support of our accessibility, our commitment to accessibility as part of the Women Plus Water community. And I'd like to thank our supporters, the Global Institute for Water Security, the College of Arts and Science at the University of Saskatchewan, as well as the Global Water Futures Observatories Network. And finally, thank you to all of you. We wouldn't be here without all of you. The community wouldn't be thriving without all of you. And so having said that, I'm thrilled to be opening up, as I say, the 2025 series. And I'll pass back over to Stacey Domansky, Outreach Specialist with University of Saskatchewan and your Women Plus Water host. Stacey, thank you.
Thank you so much, Corin, for that lovely introduction to today's event. And I also echo Corin's gratitude, of course. So thank you to everybody who has joined us today. I am also on Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis, and we pay respects to one another and work together to, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought already. This is not a good start to the inaugural Women Plus Water event. Anyways, I'm so sorry. So today we'll kick off this conversation series with three phenomenal individuals who have a lot of knowledge and experience about the water and climate crisis small island states are facing. So global warming has profound impacts on small island states, and these are things like heat exposure, food insecurity, limited access to clean water, and all of these come with serious health consequences for these communities at risk. There was a recent report in the Lancet Global Health that underscores the urgent health impacts of climate change, and it calls for a health-centered international and local adaptation strategies. This article or report is open access, so we'll share a link to it in our chat. And if you want to read more on this, please feel free to do so. I'm thrilled to be joined today by our three expert guests who will share their insights and experiences on this topic. We all have something to learn from the water climate crisis facing this region. Our interconnectedness reminds us that climate change is a shared responsibility. And by exploring these adaptation strategies, we can inspire innovation and resilience. So before we get this event started, I'm just going to go over a few logistics for today. The event will be about an hour long and it's being captioned live in English. So if you want to see the captions, just click that CC button in the bottom toolbar. The event is also being recorded and we'll share it after on our YouTube and website. And recordings in English and French will be available. We are also offering French interpretation for this event. So if you're wanting to listen in on French, you can join by clicking, I believe there's an interpretation or an English button at the bottom, and then you can select French. In the last 10 minutes of today, we are going to have an opportunity to ask questions to our guests. So if you have anything throughout the event, please feel free to use that Q&A function at the bottom. And as well, we invite all of the students and young professionals who are joining us today to stay on and have an open discussion with our guests. We're so appreciative. Thank you, guests, for volunteering a bit of your extra time today to engage with anybody who would like to stay on afterwards in a safe environment. That portion will not be recorded. So I am delighted to finally introduce our guests to you today. Their full biographies are on their website if you want to learn a little bit more. But first off, I'm going to bring in our host, Hayden Billingee. Hopefully I said that all right this time. Hayden is a development consultant with the St. Vincent and Grenadines, and he's currently pursuing a master's degree at the University of Saskatchewan. Hayden has a big experience with over 18 years in the protected areas and park planning with forest ecosystem management and environmental assessment. And he's also worked with many international organizations such as the United Nations Development Program, United Nations Environment Program, and the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. So welcome, Hayden. Thanks for being here. Next up, we have Jerry Eikemans. Hopefully I said that all right too. Jerry is the director of the Department of Social and Environmental Determinants for Health Equity of the Pan American Health Organization. Jerry has over 30 years of experience in different parts of the world, and this includes Latin America, Asia, and Africa. And her leadership has spearheaded programs that prioritize promoting and protecting people's health. So thank you for being here today, Jerry.
Thank you.
Lastly, we have Ashley Lashley. So Ashley is the founder of the Ashley Lashley Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering young people to lead climate and health action initiatives and fostering sustainable development globally. Ashley serves as the CARICOM, hopefully I said that okay, CARICOM Youth Advisor, or Youth Ambassador, apologies, the UNICEF Youth Advocate, and is a youth advisor to the CEO for the Global Center for Adaptation for Barbados. So welcome, Ashley. Again, thanks for joining us here today. So I will now pass it off to your host today, which is Hayden Billingee. So Hayden, I'll let you kick it off with a little bit of a more in-depth introduction to yourself.
Thank you, Stacey. Such an honor to be here today for the first conversation series. Buiti Binafi, that means good morning in our local language. I am a proud Garifuna from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, one of the most picturesque island states of the Caribbean. And as a descendant of the Kalinago people, we appreciate and respect our connection to land and environment, and not only for providing us with essential ecosystem goods and services, but it helps to regulate our temperature, our climate, and water, etc. But it also creates and provides cultural and spiritual functions that we need on a day-to-day basis. I have worked over 11 Caribbean countries in ecosystem-based adaptation, and I've come to see very firsthand some of the impacts that climate change is having in the region, especially as it relates to water scarcity. And unfortunately, women are acutely affected by these particular water-related impacts. And so we see it even more profound in rural and marginalized communities. So today we want to unpack some of these gender dimensions of these climate-related challenges. And so I'm really happy to be here to be part of this conversation. At this point, I would have Jerry do a short intro of herself and then Ashley, and then we'll kick right into the discussion for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hayden and everyone. Thanks for this opportunity. Sorry if I sound a little stuffed. It's very cold here in Washington, D.C., and a lot of people are not well. So Caribbean is actually a much better option at the moment. So I'm Gerry Eikemans. I'm originally from the Netherlands, but I have worked and lived most of my time in Latin America and the Caribbean. I'm a medical doctor by training and a public health expert. And at the moment, I'm fortunate to lead a department in the Pan American Health Organization, which is about social and environmental determinants and particularly health equity. So I'm very pleased to be here today. We know that water, as was already said, is the lifeline. Without water, there is no life. And the issue of sufficient and quality access to water in the SIDS has never been guaranteed. And now with the climate crisis, it's even less something that we can take for granted. We're going to talk more about that, how this climate crisis is going to make the situation much worse, and also who are going to be disproportionately impacted. I think we cannot talk about water or climate or development or health without talking about equity and populations who are particularly vulnerable to crisis, to the absence of water. And then, of course, women are very much, depending on their situation, part of that vulnerability. So I'm looking forward to this discussion, and thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Ashley, could you do the short introduction at this time. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. As Harry would have mentioned, it is a pleasure to be here speaking to you guys. As you heard in my bio, I'm predominantly known to be a youth activist within the sustainability realm. My advocacy journey actually began on the intersection of climate and health. So in looking at water scarcity, firstly, I do come from a water scarce country. I'm based in Barbados. And I grew up hearing all the time that my island Barbados is entirely surrounded by water. But that's a fact. But I could have never grasped why we are categorized as a water scarce country. But recently I found out that it's due to our limited freshwater resources, the growing demand, and the increasing impacts of climate change. And in Barbados, we don't really have any major rivers or lakes. We really rely heavily on underwater or underground aquifers, which are extremely vulnerable to contamination and saltwater intrusion. And being a youth activist, I've seen firsthand the changes within our overall climate as it relates to climate change. And as we know, climate change has made rainfall more unpredictable, leading to longer droughts and reducing water availability. And based on our growing population and tourism sector really place a high demand on our limited water supply already. So I'm extremely looking forward to today's conversation because for me as a young activist and as a young person within the environmental and sustainability space, my island, Barbados, has really placed special emphasis on desalination. But this is a costly and energy intensive solution to the problem. So again, when we're talking about water scarcity, we also have to look at water inequalities and equity, as my other colleague would have mentioned. So I'm definitely looking forward to today's chat. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley and Jerry. I think we've already kickstarted the discussion because we are talking about small islands. We're talking about scarcity of resources. We're talking about limited lakes and rivers and absence of those, and the reliance on water that's harvested from rain water and also groundwater. So let's kickstart the discussion by asking a very interesting question. So we can start or continue from where you left off, Ashley. What would you say are the key challenges that small island states face regarding water resource and climate change?
To be honest, that's a very tough question because we hear all over the news, we read multiple stories, we've seen multiple papers that as sea level continues to rise, the salt water seeps into our underground, making it unsafe for drinking and agriculture. And for many small island developing states where space and resources are limited, finding alternative sources can be expensive and difficult. So persons would have seen recently that a lot of leaders from across small island developing states would be calling for different multilateral institutions to provide more access to grant funding other than that of loans. And recently I was reading an article from the Maldives that stated due to the same rising sea levels and over extraction of under our groundwater supplies, many islands across the Maldives have experienced saltwater intrusion again, making it difficult to access potable water. So as a result, they have become heavily dependent on rainforests or rainwater harvested and imported bottled water. I mean, even when we're looking at the water conversation at home, when we're doing beach cleanups, we noticed that one of the major polluters is that of plastic bottled water. So that's a major problem that many small island developing states are facing. And deepening my research, even in one of my close countries of St. Lucia, they also experience significant saltwater intrusion in coastal aquifers, especially in the Sac Valley. And as a result, we've seen that farmers have struggled with reduced crop yields due to the higher salinated water, forcing them to really invest in costly desalination solutions or shift to less water intrusive crops. So many small island developing states, we know this, continuously deal with the increasing extreme weather events like hurricane and sometimes heavy rainfall. And because of this, these can lead to causes of flash flooding or even contamination of our water sources, and damage to infrastructure can take can take years to repair. And for me, be it in this space, I would say it can be somewhat frustrating because our communities don't always have the resources to recover quickly. And this is where adaptation come in, but also a balance between adaptation and mitigation. And climate change and the climate crisis just keeps making it worse and worse. So there really needs to be that heightened level of stronger policies to protect our natural resources, and we must continue to raise the necessary awareness and pushing for change when it comes to the conversation around water sustainability.
Thanks, Ashley. That's quite interesting rather, because last year we had one of the worst coral bleaching events in history, and we have also had some of the highest temperatures within the last 2 years, 2023, 2024. And to add to that, we have had some severe droughts in the Caribbean. Jerry, how do you see this impacting water security, water scarcity, and issues of accessibility and water equity?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think Ashley already mentioned some very important points. Yes, we've seen that also the earliest Hurricane Category 5 in the Caribbean last year. And as you said, we have had record-breaking heats globally, but also in the Caribbean. So these are things that are going to be extremely important. So when I look at issues as related to access, not to quality water, to sufficient water, to continuous water, and how this impacts health, for example, that's where I think we really need to pay attention. No? We know that without water there's no health. For hygiene, for cooking, for you name it, hand washing, etc. So the most direct impacts that we will see, and we already see that, is diarrheas, no, and they're coming back. You see, and these are also very threatening. For example, for tourism, if you have an outbreak of diarrhea, there's some viruses that are directly related to the lack of hygiene and water that have huge impacts. We also know that when people have not sufficient water coming from the tap, or no water at all, or not tap at all, because many of the Caribbean countries still also use standpipes where people, and particularly women, have to go and fetch the water. But if they don't have sufficient water, they will store it. And what happens when you store water? You get dengue. And we've also seen the largest dengue outbreaks in the region this last year. We saw during the pandemic when some very simple measures like washing your hands with water and soap, if you do not have access to water at home, you cannot wash your hands with water and soap. So these are some of the things that are really, really important. And maybe one last thing related to what we eat, what we drink. We also know that if people rely on the bottled water that Ashley was referring to, because the access or the quality of the water that comes from a tap is not sufficient, or people don't trust the quality, which also sometimes happens, they rely on bottled water. But what happens if the bottled water is too expensive? We see that people buy sodas, buy sugary drinks instead of water. So this whole epidemic of obesity that we also see in the Caribbean, in small island states, all over the world, small island states, is also related to that. And of course, the issue, if you have more and more salt water, it's also more difficult to grow crops, to have a healthy agriculture. So these things are all interrelated. So these are a couple of things I'd like to flag. Thanks.
Thanks, Jerry. You talked about the increasing intensity of hurricanes and this also lead to the issue of floods within small islands, and this has implications for water quality and quantity. We also see loss of water infrastructure as a result of these floods, and also this impacts a lot of the water retention capacity issues in the region. This, of course, is costing us, as Ashley said, and as a region, we have to be able to be in a position to address these issues. But I'm interested in to see how what are some of the gendered impacts that are kind of intersecting with these challenges of climate change and water scarcity?
So I can say something about that. And then Ashley, of course. So I already mentioned the issue of, who is going to get the water if there is not sufficient water? It's the women, or the girls. And this is something all over the world, but also particularly in the Caribbean. But there are also other issues related to this. Time, one of the things we know when we talk about gender equality, etc., is that women are the caregivers in our society. So if you get, more people that suffer from heat, from no heat-related diseases, etc., who are going to be the ones taking care? What is the time women have to spend, to do things that are, related to getting water, etc. So they're the ones responsible for the cooking, large part of the time. So these are some of the issues that I'd like to highlight, but I'm sure Ashley can add some.
Thank you, Jerry. Over to Ashley.
Yeah, definitely. I can agree that women and girls are, across many small island developing states, we've seen that they're predominantly responsible for collecting water, which is kind of like an oxymoron or contradicting, in my opinion, when we're looking at the topic of gender equality. But limited access to clean water and sanitation facilities certainly poses significant health risks for a lot of women, especially during menstruation and pregnancy. And that inadequacy or inadequate hygiene can lead to infections and other health complications, which further exacerbates the gender disparities in the health sector. And I was reading an article again where in Vanuatu, where women in rural areas often rely heavily on rainwater collection, which becomes unreliable during the dry season. And this in itself has limited access to sanitary facilities, and that really makes it difficult for them to manage their hygiene needs, impacted their dignity and health. And as climate-related disasters continue across many states, it can continue to exacerbate the gender-based violent rates that we're seeing when a disaster has occurred. And the overcrowded and under-resourced shelters may lack the adequate security measures, increasing the risks again of violence against women and girls. And this in itself has tremendous stress and disruptions that are caused by disasters can continue to lead to higher instances of domestic violence. So when I think we're talking about the gender-related issues and impacts of water, there really needs to be a much stronger call to action for addressing the integration of gender perspectives into climate policies to really ensure that women's participation in one, decision making, and two, empowering women through education and economic opportunities, I think is crucial for building those resilient communities in the face of climate change. And for me, even for me as a woman, I think one of the most critical components of the water crisis when we're talking about the gender disparities is the link that it has to hygiene.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
And maybe
Thank you.
one
And Jerry,
other
yes,
thing.
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So I think one other thing is important. If you look at where is this water scarcity in the countries, it is in the poor neighborhoods, and that's where you have, an overrepresentation of single parent households head by women. So again, gender and poverty are also something we really need to take into account in this equation. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Ashley, you mentioned women in the place of power when it comes to decision making. Do you think that in small island states, women are underrepresented in political and decision making bodies, and that has implication on gender specific needs that are not addressed regarding water scarcity? And that is a question across the board for both of you.
That's a hard question for me to answer because where we are in Barbados, our prime minister is a female, our deputy prime minister is a
Exactly.
and most of women holding public offices now are female. So what I've seen though throughout AOSIS and other climate organizations across the Caribbean that focus on water, that we're seeing the rise of women taking the lead on the water conservation, to be honest. Still most of the men who are engineers within, well, most men who are engineers still consume the majority of jobs within the water sector. So I think definitely when it comes to a policy standpoint, or even an education standpoint, the sensitization and awareness to children and other young people, it must start at a very young age to really educate them about the jobs that are available within the water and climate sector, to really get them aware about their role in taking action for these issues.
Absolutely. Thank you. Jerry, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's as Ashley says, there are of course countries where we have a female prime minister, etc. But if you look in general at the water and sanitation sector, that's still really largely dominated male sector. And I think it's really important also that women get more into those engineering jobs and into the planning, etc. Because that is really where things happen. And women also. The sensitivity that is needed for things that we have been talking about, related to poverty, related to making sure that you do, bring in solidarity, bring in different ways of providing access to water. I think that women are really needed in that discussion to strengthen that.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think we talked a lot about the impacts, and we talked a lot about the gendered impacts of the climate change challenges between small island states. Now we want to talk about what are some of the initiatives or programs that are currently in place to address the water climate crisis in small island states. Jerry, you want to start this discussion off?
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I have to say that even though there are things, it's not sufficient. I think and there are a lot of initiatives that come from the communities itself, from young people, from leaders, etc. But I think what is really going to be important is that the government steps up and as we were talking earlier, we need to look at adaptation to climate change. I mean, we of course we have to continue to mitigate to make sure that we do not make further damage, but we are already at a point that we have to have water plans, access to water plans that are climate resilient. We have to make sure that we have action plans, national action plans that integrate health and water into those action plans. The Caribbean has some very good examples in our region. We work with countries in the Caribbean and in Latin America, and we have most Caribbean islands already have in place this health national action plan, where the really adaptation plan, where it really looks at what needs to be done already now to be ready for tomorrow and for a further future. And because business as usual is not cutting it, and that requires some very, very big investments. We talked already a little bit about that, both national investments, but also the international solidarity that is going to be needed, and that's being discussed in the COPs, etc., on how countries can get sufficient resources to do what they need to do. Because this is, if you already had 30-40% of the people not covered by water, this is only going to get worse. So how do we make sure that things do advance and happen?
Thank you. I also want to mention some initiatives in the Caribbean. Right now, the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, there are a number of grants that are given for specific issues related to climate change adaptation in the region. And this particular fund is called the Ecosystem-Based Adaptation Facility, where these grants are targeting restoration of ecosystems. To build resilience at the ecosystem level, but also building resilience at the community level. And these projects range from restoration of watersheds all the way down to the rich to reef approach, where we're focusing on restoration of coral reefs and mangrove ecosystem across 11 Caribbean countries. So we have to start to talk about how do we use these projects and initiatives as a springboard to address water scarcity issues and as it relates to gender in the region. Ashley, do you have any intervention?
Yeah, well, I can't really speak to the projects that are happening across the region on water scarcity. But through the Ashley Foundation that I started 5 years ago, through the Healthy and Environmentally Friendly Youth Campaign, which we call HEY, which looks at the intersection of climate and health, and is the largest youth climate and health movement globally. We have funded, with the support of our partners, some projects that have that indirect link to water. For instance, during our first funding cycle, we would have supported a project entitled Build Up BIM in a Growth Program, where it looked at those sustainable farming practices focused on hydroponic systems to grow lettuce, seeing that Barbados was facing a drought a couple of years ago, using that nutrient-rich water instead of salt. And for us, when they wrote the concept note, it provided a solution not only to food security, but it was also able to educate youth about climate smart agriculture and water conservation. And even last year, through our other funding call, after Hurricane Beryl affected many Caribbean countries, I didn't even know that there was a seaweed farming industry. And this one guy, he submitted a proposal to us for a project entitled Sea Water Science for Seaweed Recovery Initiative to support women seaweed farmers in St. Vincent that were affected by that hurricane. And that included providing him with resources for salt water testing equipment and training to really empower farmers to manage their seaweed farms more effectively, ensuring that long-term resilience against other climate challenges. And then finally, from a regional perspective, one of the other projects that we would have supported was entitled The Passage of Water for Life, that looked at focusing on rainwater harvesting and quality education through social mapping of water-related challenges in specific communities. And it really looked at understanding how their local environment connects to the broader ecosystem. So for me, when it looks at when we look at water, when we look at issues that are interconnected to ecosystems, we really look at how we can combine education, technology, and community involvement so that we can empower them with better ways to adapt to the water climate crisis. I hope that
Thank
makes
you.
sense.
Ashley, I think when we look at water scarcity issues, we have to look at it within the broader context of climate change and how it affects the livelihoods, how it affects our forests and ecosystems, our riverine and our coastal ecosystems. And what are some of the strategies and initiatives we are putting in place to ensure that we build resilience at all level, not only at the ecosystem level, but at the community level. And I think, Jerry, we have to look at it from that broader climate change adaptation context.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Then I think in a way climate change is forcing us, no, to really look at this interconnectivity. And of course, I always take the health perspective. We know, that health in the end is not built in our hospitals or in our clinics, no. It is really built because we have access to water in our homes, we have sufficient water, quality water, a good house, a good education. So this whole intersectoral work that needs to happen when we talk about climate change, about water sanitation, and is really important. And maybe just back to that, I just mentioned that, of course, the hospitals and the clinics are not going to be, making us healthy. They only cure us. But there's still clinics and in our region that do not have access to running water. So as long as we have those situations, we can also not provide the care that is needed. And particularly this becomes important around pregnancies, etc., that giving birth, where this can really become an issue. So we have interesting experiences like with smart hospitals, where we talk about resilient but also climate resistant hospitals. We know, and now with Hurricane Beryl that passed, we've seen that some of those clinics that we worked on with the countries and with the communities to make them smart, they were resistant to the hurricanes, and they kept functioning. So these are also things that are related to this discussion.
Thank you. And I'm happy that we are talking about SIDS and how SIDS are adapting to climate change, because we have a unique and very special sort of arrangement because of our small nature, because of our resource scarce situation. But what can the world learn from small island states about resilience and adaptation to water, climate risk or crisis? What are your thoughts? Because we sure have lessons to teach.
Want to start, Ashley?
Yeah, I can start. I think that's a very hard question because
It's multi-layered.
yeah, it's multi-layered, one, and two, so I think small island developing states for generations, even before my time, have been adapting to the varying changes within the climate. We've attended the Conference of Parties, partake in different policy documents on the environment, etc. We've constantly laid out our position on what we need to adapt better to the climate crisis. And because the question asks, what can the world learn from small island developing states when it comes to resilience and adaptation? I think that the world previously wasn't listening, but now they're forced in a position to maybe look at how small island developing states and those indigenous communities have been working to mitigate or live within the changes of their environment. So I think even when we're looking at small island communities rather than small island developing states, I think it comes back to the reliability on traditional and indigenous knowledge to adapt to their environment, one. And I think it forces the world to now look more heavily on collaborations and different practices and techniques that can drive innovative change. So I think the world can definitely learn to incorporate local wisdom and cultural practices into broader climate strategies, especially when we're talking about those climate smart technologies for sustainable adaptation. But I think too that small island developing states, in my opinion, have mastered the efficient water use and conservation strategies and techniques that we've practiced over the years, like rainwater harvesting, desalination, and wastewater recycling, have really have been implemented effectively in many islands to ensure water security. So these solutions can inspire other regions facing water shortages. And as temperatures continues to rise and we go past 1.5 to stay alive as this slogan that many small island developing states face, I think the whole entire world would need and should begin to adopt more efficient water management systems. And
Absolutely.
in looking at more efficient water management systems is where then we need to look at strengthening our early warning systems
Yeah.
and disaster preparedness. So I think
Yep.
through a more proactive approach to community drills and infrastructure reinforcement, it can serve or continue to serve as a model for larger nations facing increasing climate-related disasters.
Great answer. Thank you. Jerry, want to add to that?
Yeah,
Sorry.
although he's covered it quite well. So no, I'd like to say that, I've been blessed to work for several years in the Caribbean. I have always been amazed by the resilience, particularly of the women after hurricanes. I mean, there is a hurricane, it flattens an island, and immediately people are back on their feet. They're preparing, they're working, and so I think that is something that is absolutely amazing. But of course we cannot keep relying on that. No, I think, as I mentioned earlier, we really need to start, and the world needs to start looking at important investments to support the SIDS in really building the infrastructure that is necessary and building the protection that is necessary. I am from the Netherlands. We are investing billions of dollars in protecting, putting up our dikes, so that the water doesn't come into the country. But I mean, it's because we have the money to do that. But how do we do this in SIDS where the budget doesn't allow for those things? So we really need to look at solidarity, and those huge conferences, the COPs, etc., need to serve for countries to move to that solidarity.
Absolutely. And I really like the point Ashley made about traditional and indigenous knowledge and how that is incorporated in climate change adaptation. But Ashley, you have 1 minute to respond to this question. How do you see the youth leaders being and playing an active role in addressing water and climate challenges, and how do you see us empowering them to be positioned to do so?
I think I see youth leaders playing a role in the water scarcity conversation through one, education and capacity building. Providing young persons with climate education and technical training is key. When we look at providing them with workshops on sustainable water management, it really can help build their skills and confidence. But it also goes back to a saying that I have seen within the space of, I think some adults and persons within power limit the innovation and creativity of a lot of young people. So we really need to encourage, or what you can do is encourage more young people to develop those climate smart solutions and provide them with more access, easy access to funding and resources. from different governments, NGOs, and the private sector can really help propel them into even looking into the inclusive policy and decision makings to really have a seat at the table when it comes to these conversations. I hope I stick to that minute.
Thank you so very much. And we're out of time, so I'm going to hand you over to Stacy, and we can have the Q&A to ask further questions, and we're here to answer questions. Thank you. Over to Stacy.
Fabulous. Thank you all so very much. That was a very engaging conversation. I learned a whole bunch more, even though I know we discussed some things ahead of this event. There's a lot to learn. So thank you very much for all the insight and experience. As I think Hayden already referred to, and Ashley, you guys touched a little bit on the Indigenous and local knowledge. There's a question that came in, though, that I was hoping to still ask, and maybe you guys can expand on it a little bit more. It was from Dr. Marissa O. Enser. She's from Georgetown University's Earth Commons. Her question is, could you please discuss the vital role that Indigenous and local knowledge is playing in climate adaptation initiatives, and more specifically, water conservation and governance in SIDS? Ashley, did you have much more to maybe talk about with this topic?
No, because I'm not sure the exact practices from the Indigenous communities when it comes to water practices or certain programs that are currently being carried out in that space.
That's fair. Hayden or Jerry, are you guys able to offer any more insight on this?
Well, I want to borrow from what Ashley said earlier about we have had generations and generations of adapting to adverse impact of climate, and we have a connection as Indigenous people to our land, and we understand the rhythm of the land and the spirit of the land, and so we have a lot to offer in terms of our knowledge and the resilience that we would have developed over time, and so we have to find a space where we incorporate these indigenous ways of learning and adapting to climate change, to the climate conversation. I think this is the right space to do it, and I think this is the right time to do it, because we are actively looking for solutions to climate change, but they are holders of traditional knowledge that understands this issue and can bring some sort of interest and wisdom to this conversation.
Yes, and absolutely. And I think the other topic is, and Hayden, you work on this area on biodiversity. I think the role that Indigenous peoples play in conserving biodiversity, because that's one of the other crises that happens at the same time as the climate crisis, is extremely important. And there's, again, so much to learn from that. We're working with Indigenous communities, not only in the Caribbean, but also in South America, etc. And we see a wealth of experience and knowledge that we really need to not only take from them, but work with the communities to ensure that they can implement and be supported in what they know they need to do.
Thank you guys so very much. That's all the questions that came in, but I actually have one for you guys that I've been kind of stewing on since we got to talk ahead of this event. It's kind of around how you can maintain your motivation, maintain your resilience when you're working in a field like this. Like, the challenges are overwhelming. These countries, these states are getting hammered with hurricanes every year. The access to water, the droughts, the deluges, et cetera, et cetera. Like, how do you guys maintain that resilience and motivation when you're dealing with this type of impacts to these communities?
Well, the Caribbean is plagued with a lot of disaster, and it is in part climate related. And we have had a history of dealing with hurricanes. And so we have built that community sort of cohesiveness that binds us together, that allows us to bounce back really quickly, as Jerry would have mentioned earlier. And believe it or not, when I moved to North America, I started to appreciate even more the community cohesion that the Caribbean has and make it a very special place. And so people are willing and able to help each other in crisis. and people are able to band together to make sure that they build back together. And that is one thing that we can share with the world. And I think is one thing that the Caribbean has that's very unique and that has made us quite resilient over time. Ashley, I know you have quite a bit to say about this because as a Bajan, you would have had that experience.
As Stacey would have said, the challenges are overwhelming, but I think the hope for the future is more powerful. And I say that because the more I engage with young people who see the challenges and have ideas to solve issues that they're facing, I think that keeps me motivated. And again, it's just a matter of providing resources to persons who have the ideas, even if they fail. Consistency is key. So just having a hope for the future, that I would say that that's what keeps me motivated.
Yes, and although I don't live in the Caribbean, but as I said, I have lived it. When you have more than 30 years working in international development and health and labor, you sometimes do get a little bit desperate because you do see progress, but also you see that so much more could be done if the money were in the right place, if the power would be in the right place, in the right hands. So definitely, but it's exactly what Ashley and Hayden are saying. If you see, the young people with their ideas, if you see also that, for after all those climate change conferences finally held is centrally at the agenda, finally equity is, being recognized as one of the important things on this agenda, then you see there's also progress. But really, what brings the energy and the hope is what happens at the local level in the communities, and that that cohesion that Hayden is talking about is absolutely crucial also.
Well, for me, that ended on a little bit more of a higher note about the community and how everybody bands together. That is really fabulous to hear, although unfortunate that you guys are mostly in a disaster area, as Hayden mentioned. So we are wrapping up to the end of our hour right now. So we'll conclude today's conversation. So again, I want to thank you three for this fabulous discussion. We really do appreciate your willingness to share your expertise and to share your time with everybody today. And also to everyone who attended today, of course, thank you as well. We, as Women Plus Water, this community continues to grow, and it's impactful because of all of us here today. So hopefully you can join us for our next Women Plus Water conversation. It'll be held on Tuesday, different from our typical Thursday, but Tuesday, February 11th, where our guests will be discussing inclusive fieldwork. Not exclusive, inclusive. This event will be in celebration of the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. So please head to our website and register if you haven't already done so. And we look forward to seeing you next month. And of course, thank you to everybody, Corin Schuster Wallace, Viviana Barrero Nino, Tara Hackle, and Jessie Widow, and of course our supporters. You guys have all come together to make this series possible. So we appreciate everything that you all do for us. So hopefully we see you guys next month. And anybody as well, if you would like to stay on, early career individual or student, if you guys would like to come and join just an open discussion with our guests, please feel free to do so. But that will conclude our event. We'll end our recording and we'll continue on to our more casual portion of our event. Thank you guys all.